Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a powerful budget team that I had amazing results with while battling on my wife's account. This team worked so well for me in the Open Great League that my wife's account ELO revealed at 2545, one of the highest starting ELOs I've ever seen, with a 78% win rate. The set after, this account was able to make it to ace rank at 2570. Normally that's veteran rank, but the game only lets you rank up one rank per set, so I'll have to play one more set before I'll officially get the veteran badge. The team is Togekiss, Furret, and Quagsire. You can very easily use Licky over Furret or a Shadow Quagsire instead of the regular. I was more so just limited by the fact that this account doesn't really have a lot of meta viable Pokemon, but even with those restrictions, this team was amazing. We pick up a slightly negative lead in game number 1, leading Togekiss into Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff has very strong neutral matchups across the board, so getting rid of Wigglytuff with this team will always be a bit of a group effort, but all of the Pokemon can at least do okay there. My opponent overfarms to throw an alignment with Icy Wind, a very odd play, but Aura Sphere lands and I'm able to take the knockout. My opponent sends in Charjabug looking for a big farm down. I cannot afford to concede that farm down, so I end up throwing one peck and then saving that energy and then sending in the Furret. My opponent is not switching out as I'd hoped. Instead, they're staying in with the Charjabug and they're firing off the back-to-back X-Scissors. I tank the first, shield the second, and now I'm down 2 shields to 0. However, I'm pretty close to a move on the Togekiss and I have a ton of energy on the Furret. So even though I'm down 2 shields, I still don't feel like I'm in a terrible spot. Swift will take the knockout. My opponent is going to put up the shield. They send in Feraligatr, but Feraligatr unable to get the snipe down before I make the Swift. Swift does do very nice damage, and I know that I'm pretty close to the move on the Kiss. So I can bring it in, fire off the Aura Sphere. This will guarantee the shield. My opponent cannot afford to let the Feraligatr go, and then it's time to send in the Quagsire. This is the non-Shadow Quagsire because my wife's account just does not have a Shadow one. I do think that Shadow Quagsire obviously would be very, very playable here. That's normally what gets played, but she doesn't have one, so we ended up using the regular Quagsire and still managed to get quite a lot of wins. Aqua Tail into the Mud Shot down is perfect, and back in comes the Charjabug. The game comes down to this. Can Togekiss live a Volt Switch? If so, we win the game, and Togekiss hangs on, gets the peck down, and that's a good game. We get the Dream lead in the next match, Togekiss into Mightyena. Basically, every single Mightyena D-Gen team just gets core broken to smithereens by Togekiss. Togekiss just has a completely dominant matchup into Mightyena. My opponent safe switches a Carbink, and Quagsire is here to remind this Carbink that this is just not a safe switch. Carbink goes for the Moonblast. Quagsire does not care. I am going to need, it looks like, 3 Aqua Tails to take the knockout. The non-Shadow Quagsire does not hit very hard, but I was able to tank that Moonblast very comfortably. So I will look to overfarm quite significantly, fire off this Aqua Tail, and my opponent doesn't really have a reason to play for switch advantage. They send in a Venusaur as their final Pokemon, and as always with every Mightyena team, they are ABA weak to the Togekiss. Now it could be tempting to bring in the Togekiss here, but I know that as long as I'm able to just sacrifice the Furret, I don't have any loose cons. So they fire off the Frenzy Plant, I wait the turn to ensure they don't catch onto the Mightyena, and fire off the Swift. Whether my opponent shields or whether they don't shield, the game is already over. They end up shielding so I can bring in the Kiss and just go for the 1 shield farm down. My opponent is now in an impossible position. They can't stay in and they can't switch, because no matter what happens, the Togekiss is just going to completely overwhelm them. So I'm able to build up to the back-to-back. Aura Sphere takes the 1-hit knockout, Venusaur gets pecked down, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, Togekiss into Clodsire. Now this matchup is one of the many reasons why Psyshock is very, very nice on Togekiss. The Psyshock ends up making Togekiss very flexible, and I'm a very, very big fan of Pokemon that are very flexible when they have quite a bit of energy. My opponent waits the turn to ensure that I do not get a catch, and they're going to be firing off the Sludge Bomb. I put up the shield, they safe switch into Shadow Feraligatr, and I will respond with Furret. Furret is going to have a very favorable matchup into the Feraligatr, but it's very important that I switch in pretty quickly as the Furret, because I want to ensure that I can outpace and make the Trailblaze before they make the second Hydro Cannon. If you end up overfarming too much, then Furret actually ends up in a pretty negative spot. Feraligatr fires off the Hydro Cannon. I'm just going to let this go, because I have a pretty evil idea. I'm just going to go for a 1 shield peck down with the Kiss. My opponent is never going to make another Hydro Cannon, so they're going to be in a ton of trouble. Togekiss energy is pretty universally good, so they shouldn't really have a strong answer to this. They pivot back into the Clodsire. Clodsire takes huge damage. I send in the Quagsire, and Quagsire gets a 3 Mudshot farm down. In the back, they have Jellicent, And this is actually a scenario where being the regular Quagsire is a little bit better, because Stone Edge is going to 2-hit KO anyway, but I'm in a spot where I'm just never going to get knocked out. My opponent makes a pretty grave error and they overfarm past 100 energy. They go to 104, and that lets me cycle reset them, and now they're forced to throw on alignment. They will fire off energy going for the Shadow Ball, but I'm the regular Quagsire. I can always hang on. My opponent tries to farm up to 2 more surfs, but in that time, I'm able to make the Stone Edge. Stone Edge takes the knockout. Now I can send back in the Togekiss, make the Aura Sphere, as the Feraligatr was completely energy dry. We could have farmed down, but better safe than sorry. Aura Sphere takes the knockout, and we clutch another win. We see a very familiar lead in the next match, leading Kiss into Wigglytuff once again. Wigglytuff does have the better stat product overall, and that's what gives it the advantage in the head-to-head matchup against the Kiss. However, what Togekiss has is incredibly fast pacing and basically universal coverage. Togekiss is almost always going to be able to hit for at least neutral damage. My opponent safe switches into a Volt Switch Fortress, and I just bang back-to-back Aura Spheres and send in the Quagsire. This matchup is a very sad one for Volt Switch Fortress. They end up going for the Rock Tomb. They know how little their Sand Tombs are going to do, so they just want to try and lower my attack as much as possible, because they know that I'm a regular Quagsire, so I don't do a lot of damage either. My opponent fires off another charge attack. They did farm up to another Rock Tomb, and their strategy has been revealed. They're just trying to debuff me as much as possible, because they know that I just can't really do any damage now that I'm at -2. I fire off the Stone Edge. That does absolutely nothing. But the good news for me is I know that I can survive whatever they throw here. So I'm just going to look to pivot out. Rock Tomb lands, in comes the Furret. Furret snipes down with Sucker Punches, and that is a massive swing of momentum. Now, I just have charge attacks banked everywhere. I have so much energy on the Togekiss. I have a move banked on the Quagsire as well. They bring in the Wigglytuff, and they end up shielding. The fact that they're shielding makes me think that they're very weak to Furret in the back. Even so, I still feel pretty okay no-shielding the Furret. That's not going to do a lot of damage, and I have so much energy stored everywhere. I'm pretty sure I have like 1.5 Aura Spheres stored on the Togekiss. I have 7 Mud Shots of energy on the Quagsire, and their final Pokemon is revealed to be Unova Stunfisk. This game is over. I just have energy everywhere. Trailblaze gets the shield, but I can let this go, because they're never going to be able to Thundershock down the Quag before I get both my moves. So back in comes the Quagsire, and now the charge attack spam begins. Aqua Tail number 1, immediately followed by Aqua Tail number 2. After this, I can probably Mud Shot down. If I wanted to, I could switch in the Togekiss and fire off the Dynamic Punch, but no, we're just going to let that go and take the win. We move to the next match, picking up a bit of an awkward lead, leading Togekiss into Jellicent. Jellicent has incredibly strong neutral matchups, and in the head-to-head here against Togekiss, generally Jellicent will be favored. However, the play that I really like to go for is trying to go for a catch onto Furret. Even if they end up going for the Surf Bait, it's still worthwhile to go for this. They end up going for the Shadow Ball, which is incredible news for me. But even if they had gone for the Surf, I would still rather take a Surf on Furret than on Quagsire or onto the Kiss. So that still works out pretty nicely. My opponent sends out Shadow Drapion. Drapion's Crunch will hit for big damage, but if they try and farm down, Furret is going to be able to hang on and make a second Swift. This Swift will secure the knockout unless they put up the shield. They're going to let it go and reveal their final Pokemon is Morpeko. At this point, this game really feels unlosable. Even if they are running Seed Bomb on Morpeko is a pretty mediocre move. They are actually running Seed Bomb, but guess what? We survived that because we're the regular Quagsire. We're able to hang on, and from here, as long as I just get some kind of damage onto the Morpeko, I'm in a very good spot because I have a lot of energy on the Togekiss. They pivot into the Jellicent, I send in the Togekiss, but because they had a Shadow Ball caught earlier, they just don't have the energy to keep up. The pacing on Togekiss is relentless, and it appears my opponent has given up. They just stop tapping. Psyshock would have taken the knockout as my opponent top lefts on the CMP tie. We move to the next match, picking up a very surprising lead, Togekiss into Ferrothorn. My opponent safe switches into Pelipper, and sometimes in these pre-ranked 20 matches, you're going to see some very interesting teams, and this was definitely one of them. Pelipper plus Ferrothorn. Against the Pelipper, I'm going to be firing off this Psyshock, hoping to force a shield, and then just looking to send in the Furret. Furret should be able to tank a Hurricane no problem, and ideally I would love to try and exit this matchup boosted so I can have boosted Sucker Punch damage onto that Ferrothorn. So I overfarm, play for the Trailblaze, and this is when I learn that I do not know Pelipper counts, because I end up losing charge attack priority. My opponent reveals they have a Blastoise in the back, and man, I have really not played well this game whatsoever. But the good news is we're still not out of it, because switch timer's up, they switch locked the Blastoise, and I was able to bank a ton of energy on Togekiss. It really feels like energy on Togekiss is kind of the get out of jail free card. Even though I've played this matchup terribly, I should still be in a winning position because I have so much stored energy. Quagsire Stone Edge pressures the final shield, and with all shields down, I should be able to sweep with the Togekiss. In this moment, this is a very intentional Aqua Tail. I just want to ensure that they're in Aura Sphere range. They probably were in Aura Sphere range already, but I just wanted to guarantee it. They go for the Hydro, it does not take the knockout, there's a simultaneous switch Togekiss into the Pelipper, and I just fully farm them down. My opponent tried to read the combo play, but I was always just going to throw fast moves to ensure that I didn't end up having a move caught. Back in comes Ferrothorn, and I should just be able to double up on the Togekiss and win the game. Because a very nice thing about Togekiss, it is a very high attack stat, it's almost always going to be winning charge attack priority. So I just throw 2 and the move, double up on the Aura Spheres, and even though Blastoise has a charge attack loaded, it's not going to matter. Aura Sphere takes the knockout, back in comes the Blastoise. Arguably, that was a very terribly played game by me. I played to a CMP tie that I lost for no reason, but Togekiss energy is just OP, so we win anyway. This, however, is a very bad matchup, leading Togekiss into Shadow Zapdos. I save switch into Quagsire, fire off the Aqua Tail just for a catch and sneak from my opponent onto Licky. That energy on the Zapdos is going to be a problem. The Licky is already at a Shadow Ball. That is why getting the catch and the sneak is so important, because that's just 13 free energy that my opponent never would have had if they didn't go for the catch and sneak play. I fire off the Stone Edge, that is going to do some pretty considerable damage, and I assume that they will commit to the Shadow Ball, so I throw 1 and fire off the Aqua Tail, taking the knockout. Unfortunately, the Zapdos is still very much around, and they're going to CMP tie the Quagsire, denying my energy. This Zapdos, I believe, now has 2 residual Thunder Shocks, and I'm going to bring in the Furret. If this Zapdos is on Thunderbolt, I believe they're now at it, and Thunderbolt would be devastating. It's kind of a 50-50. Are they on Thunderbolt or are they on Heat Wave? Heat Wave would give them the ability to one-shot potential Fortress, so there's a decent chance, the more that I think about it, they're probably on Heat Wave. If they are on Heat Wave, then I'm probably going to want to no-shield this because I can survive the Drill Peck. They go for the Drill Peck. That still does so much damage. That did way more than I expected. And they get a catch and sneak onto Azumarill. That's really not great because they were able to save the Zapdos. And now Azumarill is just so bulky. I really can't do a lot of damage to it. Togekiss energy can two-shot almost everything in the meta. Unfortunately, Azumarill is not one of those Pokemon. I will fire off the back-to-back Psyshocks. Azumarill will always be able to make 2 Ice Beams here. And the Zapdos is one off a move. So I'm forced to let this go. My opponent goes for a Hydro Pump, taking the knockout. In comes Zapdos. I Sucker Punch down. Do we survive the bubble? We do not, and unfortunately, we lose an incredibly close game. Hopping into the next match, picking up a pretty awkward lead, Togekiss into Galarian Wheezing. The first time I played out a Galarian Wheezing with this team, I tried to go for a catch on 5, and my opponent did not fall for it. So this time, I decided to just throw right away, and my opponent actually ends up CMP tying me. I think the better time to go for a catch is on 9, because they kind of have to throw right away, or you end up outpacing. Here, they end up waiting the turn, so a very nice play from my opponent, but the fact that they stay in to throw energy is amazing. They overheat me, and then they're going to be sending out Annihilape. I think saving the energy and bringing in Annihilape probably would have been better, because Annihilape could have just fired off a close combat. But I do see their line of thinking. If they go for the overheat, then they can just low kick me into Rage Fist range and exit with energy that's boosted for the Togekiss. However, I already have quite a lot of energy on the Togekiss, so I'm pretty fine taking a +1 Rage Fist in exchange for a healthy Peck farm down. This means that I'm always going to be able to outpace the Wheezing, and the Wheezing is just going to get one-shot by Psyshock. They Rage Fist and then send in Shadow Quagsire. I throw 2 Pecks and then send in the Furret. That's a very important switch there. I'm able to bank a ton of energy on the Togekiss, but switch fast enough that my Furret will outpace and make the Trailblaze before they make their Aqua Tail. My opponent is in a no-win position. No matter what they do, they're gonna lose. Trailblaze takes the knockout. Back in comes the Wheezing, but I almost have 2 charge attacks loaded on the Togekiss. There's nothing they can do, and my opponent will resign the match. We pick up a bit of an awkward lead in the final match, Togekiss into Azumarill. Here, I bank a ton of energy and then save switch into Furret. My opponent staying in to throw energy is a win no matter what they throw. They throw Hydro Pump and then bring in their own Furret, but this is an absolute win. That Azumarill is now completely energy dry. They are going to struggle to get the charge stacks for the remainder of the battle. My opponent's going to have to throw here because if they don't, I'm going to make another Swift. This boosted Swift, I think, can actually pick up the knockout here. Swift lands, Furret survives on 1 HP, and that is actually the worst case scenario. I can't afford to shield, even though it would deny their charge stack, because I can't afford to be down a shield right now. They have an Azumarill, and I'm going to need both shields intact. So I bring in the Furret to absorb the Swift and get the farm down. And my opponent, I'm expecting they're going to bring in the Azumarill here. They do bring in the Azumarill. I bank the Aqua Tail for later and send in Togekiss. In the back is a non-shadow Scizor. A, what is a Scizor doing here? Scizor post double nerf is terrible. And B, why is it non-shadow? If I remember correctly, this is one of the games that happened after my placement matches. So in this battle, I'm an ace at 2570. Man, the 2500s have some wild Pokemon. Non-shadow Scizor post nerf. They end up double shielding, but I have a third Aura Sphere. This is going to do so much damage. Aura Sphere lands, they send in the Azumarill, and I respond with the Quagsire. Quagsire really cannot afford to take an Ice Beam, so I will be putting up a shield. I know the Scizor is very, very low, and that they're not at a charge stack. So I'm pretty confident that as long as I can take the knockout here on the Azumarill before they're able to make an Ice Beam, then I should be okay, because a non-shadow Night Slash is really not going to do a lot of damage. Stone Edge will take the knockout. Back in comes the Scizor. Scizor is going to make the Night Slash, but I believe in this Quagsire. It may be terrible IVs, but it hangs on, mud shots down the Scizor, and takes the win. In conclusion, this is a very strong, very easy to obtain budget team. None of the Pokemon have a single XL candy invested in them. The Quagsire is non-shadow and terrible IVs. And the Togekiss, while it does require a legacy move in Aura Sphere, is still a very cheap build, and we've had quite a few Togepi and Togetic events for people to get access to this Pokemon. I think this is a very good beginner team that people can use and kind of really learn and practice energy management, specifically when it comes to Togekiss. I think the crux of this team all comes down to how well you can play Togekiss. Togekiss is a Pokemon that is incredibly deadly if you're able to manage your energy well. Togekiss energy is very difficult to wall. Basically, one of the only things that's going to be walling it is if there's a pure Psychic type, which is very uncommon. The only one you really see is maybe like the odd Grumpig or two, or something like a Sableye, where it is the Ghost plus Dark subtyping. But in both of those situations, Peck still hits for neutral, and your backline of Furret is going to do pretty well into either one of those two options. Some strengths of the team include the fact that it's basically an auto win anytime you queue into one of those Mightyena D-Gen teams, because Togekiss just so thoroughly destroys Mightyena. You just strictly outpace Mightyena, you can shield the Poison Fangs, and they're never going to be able to Sucker Punch you down. I also really like the fact that this team has a lot of options into Gourgeist. Whether it's the Furret or the Togekiss, if you see Gourgeist, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. A slight weak spot to this team would be Volt Switch Fortress, just because Volt Switch Fortress is pretty good into Togekiss and into Furret. Usually how I would play that out, if I did see one, would be to stay in Aura Sphere and then save switch into the Quagsire. Aura Sphere either gets a ton of damage onto the Volt Switch Fortress, or it gets a shield advantage, and then from there, Quagsire up a little bit of energy is usually very, very strong. So all in all, I had a ton of fun with this team. This team produced amazing results. I believe at the end it was like a 78% win rate to make it all the way up to 2570 at Ace. And that's not something that I've done before. I've ELO revealed in the upper 2400s before, but ELO revealing above Veteran, that's something that I was actually aiming for this season on the Piplup Protective account. So I'm very happy that we were able to achieve that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video on kind of more of a budget team, a more accessible team, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.